Today we're going to talk about the changing landscape of development with the AWS Cloud. Now, I've been a software developer for over a decade now, and during that time I've seen a huge amount of change. When I look back at my career, we're not building applications the same way as we used to. Any project of significant size or value used to carry around with it a massive risk profile. And we used to tend to build these large monolithic applications that typically centered around some kind of a client-server technology and a relational database. Now, projects took weeks, if not months, to deliver. When we finally did deliver them, we ended up not meeting our customers' expectations and working around massive change cycles to help improve the application functionality. And there was little time or money for experimentation. In fact, for most of us, resources were scarce. IT resources were really expensive, they took a long time to procure, and when we did have them, we quite often ran into resource constraints. I remember quite a few years ago working for a company where I had to go down to the IT department to ask them to turn virtual machines off just so I could get my job done. And this inevitably caused, problems with other areas of the business wanting to do exactly the same thing. And we ended up building and designing these solutions that started to look pretty much the same because we were working with technologies that our IT department were willing to support. And we had little or no automation in our workflows. Today, things look very different. With the AWS Cloud, we can now build applications which have a much smaller risk profile, are smaller and more targeted, and we can deliver faster, be much more reactive to our customer needs, and see much greater productivity gains and cost improvements. And experimentation is something we can do a lot more of. With over 90 plus services, this is really changing the mindset of developers today. With this on-demand access to resource, this is something we could only dream about a few years ago. Today, we can start to think about developing and solving business problems with much more than just client-server technology and a relational database. We're no longer designing and architecting our applications around our resource constraints. And we're in a much better place to start to support evolutionary architectures. We can do this. We can be able to test with greater certainty, be faster to market, and drive significant improvements across the board in our development landscape. And this is exactly what Werner was talking about at the Sydney Summit when he said that developing with AWS is like being given superpowers. So what I want to talk to you about today is some of the developer superpowers that you're going to get when you start working with AWS Cloud. The first of these is the mobility superpowers. Well, anyone who's developed a mobile application knows how challenging this can be. You need to worry about identity management, backend processing and storage, content delivery, messaging, testing those devices across a number of different platforms and form factors. And then also you need to worry about analyzing your usage, your mobile usage, so you can get some insights into how your users are using your application, so you can drive further customer engagement. Now, AWS Mobile Hub and its SDKs makes it really easy to plug and play this into your application with minimal effort. We also have a whole range of SDKs that are supported across all of our platforms, iOS, Android, and JavaScript, and includes new integrations with the Ionic framework, Xamarin, and React Native. Now, what you see in front of you here is a mobile application that I've created with Mobile Hub. Now, this is an emulation of the application, And what you see is some basic features. We've got username and password login. We've got multi-factor, and this application is multi-factor enabled. I've got some basic functionality that allow me to interact with my identity management system. I'm also able to execute APIs that I've created and get response from the backend application logic. And I'm also able to directly interact with a NoSQL database, in this case DynamoDB, and able to execute some functions on that, like querying records and updating those records. So how did I build this application? Well, the first thing I do is go to Mobile Hub, and I give my project a name. Once I've got this started, I can choose from any of the following features, including signing up users, creating a NoSQL database, and creating cloud logic. But I can also choose things like integrating my Lex bot, my conversational bots that is driven by Lex. So starting off with my login, I'm going to choose. In this, I've got a number of different options I can choose from, but I'm going to select username and password. I can choose how people are going to sign in, whether or not multi-factor authentication is required or not. I can set my password requirements as well. And Mobile Hub's going to go ahead and it's going to create a Cognito user pool for me to be able to store my users and implement that security functionality. Next, I'm going to create a DynamoDB table. I can choose to create my own table, go through a wizard. In this instance, I've just chosen one of the example templates that we have available, so you can get started really quickly. I can choose the protection level, which is really critical from a security perspective, to only enable those users that are actually authenticated against my application access to that database. And DynamoDB and Mobile Hub's going to go ahead and create that table for me. Finally, I'm going to create an API. Again, this is very simple. I give my API a name. And what's significant here is the ability to be able to restrict API access to only signed-in users. Again, I'm using Cognito capabilities that are part of the Cognito user pool. And this is going to create a set of Lambda functions that are going to provide the backend, or they're going to provide the backend for my API. Now, once I've created this, once I've configured this, Mobile Hub's going to go ahead and it's going to create all these resources for me. And you can see here I've got access to all the resources that I've chosen in my mobile application configuration. I'm able to download sample projects for iOS, iOS Swift, Object-C, and Android, as well as get instructions for each and every one of those platforms, including how to integrate these application configuration into my JavaScript applications. So I'm going to download the sample application. And what I've got here, what I end up with here, is a full Android project, which I'm going to open up in Android Studio. It's got all of the demo code that you saw in the application that I showed you early on in the piece. And you can cut and paste this code into an existing Android application, or you can use it as is. But there's examples of how to interact with DynamoDB, how to implement queries, how to invoke your API gateway APIs. There's a whole range of, and this is a fully functional project ready for you to go. Now, what's significant about this is that this is taking me 20 minutes to set up and configure, and I've got a fully implemented cloud environment configured directly, already configured in my Android project. And this is my starting point. Now, I don't know about you guys, but that's pretty awesome. And this is a great superpower to have. Next, I want to talk to you about DevOps superpowers. Now, we'll take a quick review of what DevOps is all about. Is it a philosophy? Is it a cultural change? Is it aligning development and IT operations? Is it breaking down those barriers between those two areas of the business? Or is it like software agile development for IT operations? The fact is, it's all of these things. Now, agile still plays a significant role within DevOps, but it's probably fair to say that DevOps is succeeding in organizations that choose to adopt it, where agile hasn't, because it's not the sole responsibility of a project owner and a development team that largely works in isolation from the rest of the business to determine what business value is. It encompasses a broader set of business interests that improve collaboration with stakeholders across the business to help application delivery increase the speed, the security, and the reliability of our delivery of our applications. Now, to help us do this, we build what we call pipelines. And these are automated actions and transition that take our code from the moment we check it in right through to production. And there are many benefits to doing this. Now, organizations in the past have spent a lot of time and money and effort putting these pipelines together because it's something that's given them the competitive advantage. But what we're seeing is this is no longer the case. DevOps is being delivered as a service, which is making it attainable to everyone in the business, including small development teams or even large multinational organizations. Now, AWS has got developer services that's going to help us build these pipelines, starting with AWS Code Commit, which is a managed Git repository. Excuse me. Which is a managed Git repository that will allow you to host private repositories within your account. We've got AWS Code Build, which is an on-demand build service, which means you're only getting charged for the amount of time it takes for you to compile and test your code in units of 1 minute. Which means you don't have to have unnecessary infrastructure lying around doing nothing while you're actually not compiling anything. And to deploy, we have AWS Code Deploy. Now, orchestrating this pipeline is AWS Code Pipeline. One of the issues with, with one of the challenges is that up until now, you've had to configure all of these services yourself. We now have AWS CodeStar. Now, AWS CodeStar allows you to establish your entire pipeline within just a matter of minutes. In very much the same way as Mobile Hub allows you to configure your mobile applications in minutes. The best way to demonstrate this, to show you, is to actually show you how to do this. So we're going to start a project. The first thing I'm going to do is going to select from a series of application categories or programming languages that I want to support. In this instance, I'm going to choose a Lambda function, a Node.js Lambda functions. Now, what CodeStar is going to go ahead and do is going to help build a pipeline that correlates to the characteristics of the type of application that I want to deploy. In this instance, I've got AWS Code Commit for my source code control. I've got a code build, and I'm using CloudFormation as a mechanism for deploying my serverless application, using the serverless application model. And finally, I'm going to integrate some CloudWatch monitoring to monitor the application the sample application that CodeStar is going to deploy for me. It's going to provide me with the necessary connectivity that I'm going to need to hook up to my repository, and then start to build up a dashboard for my project. The first thing I'm going to do is configure my team. And here I can select users that are going to be part of this project, and I'm going to be able to specify what their role is and how they can access this repository remotely. I've also got the ability to extend CodeStar with the Atlassian Jira's Cloud Suite. So we're going to configure this, and I'm going to show you this a little bit later in the demo, what that looks like. As with Mobile Hub, you've got full transparency over the resources that CodeStar is going to be creating for you, and you've got access to each and every one of those, as you can see in the left-hand side of the screen. Once your application's been built and deployed, you can see on the right-hand side that you've got a pipeline already pre-configured for you that is actually deploying your sample application. You can see at the top left-hand all the commits that your team has made for this project. And once that application's been successfully deployed, you'll get a URL that points to the endpoint that was created by the API gateway hosting this Lambda application. And I can see here the application activity through the CloudWatch dashboard integration as well. Now, I've configured this project to work with my Jira account. Now, this goes into an agile project board, which allows you to configure stories and create tasks. And all of these stories and tasks will then get synchronized back into CodeStar, so you can have a single pane of glass to visualize all your project activities. Now, all of this took about 15 minutes to do. This is my starting point. I haven't had to create individual repositories, build servers, hook them all up, run this script, run that script. It's already done for you, and this is a massive improvement to productivity for your development teams. And it's a really nice way to get started to learn some of new technologies that we're releasing as well, such as how do I deploy a serverless application? You've got access to all the sample code that is provided to you, so you can see some of the mechanisms that are used to interact with the various services that CodeBuild provides you. Pretty good superpower to have. Finally, I want to talk to you about serverless superpowers. Now, Lambda is everywhere. Now, the serverless application architecture patterns that Lambda provides you is going to give you the ability to build all kinds of new and exciting applications. When we released Lambda at the end of 2014, we had humble beginnings. We had a single event source in S3, but in the meantime, over the last couple of years, we've grown to over 15 event sources that you can use to trigger events within your environments. And this does not include the myriad of events that you create yourself as part of your custom application development work. We see Lambda at the edge now. You can run Lambda across any one of our 76 edge locations to help you drive use cases like cookie inspection for redirection purposes, dynamic content delivery, or even for header inspection for security purposes. We're seeing Lambda now in embedded IoT devices to help through AWS Greengrass to help you with that disconnected IoT scenario, so you can run Lambda functions locally on your IoT device, excuse me, and support device shadow and state synchronization back to the cloud once connectivity is available. And we're seeing Lambda on our AWS Snowball Edge devices to support data analysis as you ingest data into the device, as well as being able to process and transform that data before moving that into S3 storage. And we released this month the ability to develop and test your Lambda functions locally through AWS SAM Local. Now, this provides you the ability to create event sources, as well as to invoke API gateways through a serverless application template locally, while supporting the ability to have iterative development on your computer, and has hot reloading support as well. So the serverless computing approach that Lambda brings has a simple but usable primitive: your code as a Lambda function, with nothing that looks like a server or a container. There's no need to worry about provisioning, securing, or configuring servers. There's no more Patch Tuesdays. All the availability and scalability is managed by AWS, and unlike your on-premises EC2 or container services, you're never paying for idle time. You're only paying for the amount of time it takes to execute your code in units of 100 milliseconds. And this paradigm shift is really leading to great developer productivity and operational efficiencies. So I challenge everyone here to, next time you're thinking about migrating an application to the cloud, is think about whether or not it can be rewritten as a Lambda function. Take maybe 1 or 2 developers in your team to spend a week to explore whether or not this is even possible. You might find that rather than spending a lot of time and money and effort on a mass migration, that a simple deployment of some code is all you need. So development has certainly changed. Now that you've got these superpowers, it's time to put them into action. Use these superpowers to help extend your reach into the community and deliver better public services and user and community engagements. Use them to deliver applications far quicker to the market, so you can implement policy and legislative changes much more rapidly. And use these new superpowers to help lower the cost of ownership, so you can release software quicker and not have the burden, the onerous burden of operations. But most importantly, use these superpowers to help and reinvest what really differentiates you from everyone else, which is your intellectual property, and which is embedded in your code. Thank you very much, and happy developing.